He's a Great Britain honoured on a first-class stamp as designer of the clock tower and interiors of the Houses of Parliament. He inspired generations of church architects. Without him, there would be no fun at Alton Towers. But sadly, his own short life was a roller coaster ride of illness, poverty and bereavement. Yet at the heart of everything he did was his deep-rooted Christian faith, which is why Augustus Welby Northmore Pugin is known as God's architect. This is Pugin's 200th anniversary year. So tonight, from churches which inspired or were inspired by his architecture and design, congregations from all over the country sing out the faith that motivated his every thought. I've come to Kent, to St Augustine's in Ramsgate, Pugin's last church, which he built for his own community, next door to his own house, and this is where he's buried.
People really remember Pugin mostly as a church architect, though he was very, very innovative as a domestic architect and a secular architect as well. But for Pugin, his faith was the framework within which everything else happened. So for Pugin, everything was for the glory of God.
When we speak of a church, we don't simply mean the physical building. Pugin's principal aim is to create living architecture, architecture with soul, architecture that is decorated according to its function, and its function is for the people of God, for the worship of God.
Pugin influenced an entire generation of architects, as well as being the father of an architectural dynasty. And our first hymn comes from a building that was designed, like this chapel, by his eldest son, Edward. Once at the heart of industrial Manchester, Gorton Monastery fell into disrepair in the 1990s, but it was saved from dereliction by the local community who loved it. In 1812, when Augustus Pugin was born, the only child of a French artist father and English mother, the height of fashion in art and architecture was very different from this. It was the Georgian, neoclassical style.
It wasn't British. It wasn't Christian. The Greeks and the Romans were not Christians. It was built for pagan gods, as he called them. And also, it must be said that when Pugin was growing up, the neoclassical architecture of the Regency was pretty flimsy, a lot of stucco, a lot of plaster, everything that he most disliked about the architecture and also the society, which he felt was rather stucco-fronted and hypocritical as well. Gothic architecture was the architecture of the Middle Ages in Europe, and it was more or less characterised in the 19th century. People talked about Gothic or pointed architecture. So it's all those churches and cathedrals with pointy spires and crockets and pinnacles.
And Pugin was a big fan.
Pugin loved Gothic architecture. He thought that it was the right architecture for this country because it was a native architecture. It was more practical because, as he said, if you import classical architecture from Greece and Rome, designed for a Mediterranean climate, whereas, as he said, the pinnacles in England keep off the rain. Contrast was the first book you could call an architectural manifesto. And what he was trying to say, and indeed succeeded very well in saying, was that English society had reached a crisis point. There were slums, factories, workhouses, and Contrast compares the modern state of society, especially the workhouses, which were new, they'd come in under the New Poor Law, with the way that things were organised in the Middle Ages, in which you had, Pugin believed, a much more integrated society in which the poor would be looked after in a humane manner. And that was his main point, to suggest that through architecture you achieve a different kind of society.
Pugin saw Gothic buildings as physical symbols of an idealized Christian community, and many of his contemporaries followed in his footsteps. One of these, George Gilbert Scott, claimed he was a new man after Pugin had awakened him to how architecture could give dignity to the human condition, such as the mill workers' houses Scott designed at Croydon near Halifax. Scott also restored and repaired what is now Halifax Minster, returning the ancient church of St. John the Baptist, whose feast we celebrate today, to what was as near as possible to its former medieval splendour.
He learned to draw from his father, who was an artist and an architectural draftsman, but he never learned architecture per se. I mean, he learned on the job and he learned by trial and error, and there were some quite big errors.
Really?
Yes, no, absolutely. At the his church of St Anne's at Keighley, there's just a little note in his diary which says belfry fell down.
Oops.
Oops. He practiced architecture like a romantic artist. His own favourite church while he was building it was St Giles Cheadle, which was paid for by his great patron, the Earl of Shrewsbury, so the money wasn't too short there for once. It's a romantic work of art because every single surface and every medium, the glass, the metalwork, the ceramics on the floor, the painted wall, the carved stone, is all to his design. He influenced everybody in the 19th century, whether they liked him or not, whether they knew it or not.
All Saints' Church in Cheltenham has Gothic, Pre-Raphaelite, and also arts and crafts interiors, all revealing elements of how Pugin's principles influenced later designers. All Saints was begun by local architect John Middleton back in 1865, the very same year that Cardinal John Henry Newman wrote and published his poem, The Dream of Gerontius, the origin of one of our best-loved hymns.